Wow, that's certainly uplifting. Thank you, Amber, oldest daughter of mine, for that beautiful introduction and touching on some of the, I guess, important aspects about me and my life. I'd like to, first of all, begin by congratulating each of you, the students, particularly on the fertile passages you chose from the letter from Birmingham jail. You did a good job and you leaned into it. Dr. Stacy, as usual, thank you for organizing this Interfaith Temple service and for the work that you do, and certainly Dr. Eve, who's always with us and helping us with our technology and so many other things. And to you again, Coach Amber, always thank you for the role that you play. Amber mentioned Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity and the fact that Dr. King was a member, and the early civil rights movement came out of Alpha Phi Alpha. And you should know that the monument for Dr. King down on the mall started with Alpha. We raised the initial money, conceived it, and did a lot of the initial work. I was asked to be on that organizing committee way back when I was in my late 20s and early 30s. And I said, wow, that would take like 20 years. I don't have that type of time to put into into a project. And lo and behold, I see the names of my frat brothers, the ones that I know very well that live here in the Montgomery County, Maryland chapter, on the wall down there as having been some of the organizers of that. It was a pleasure. I asked Stacy to play the clip from John Lewis at the beginning. And I had the pleasure, way back when Amber was in her mother's stomach, actually to pick up John Lewis from the airport when he first came to Washington to work for Jimmy Carter, and drove him around and helped him find a new home and get situated in Washington. And then on another occasion, I was with him for a week as I traveled for Operation Big Vote. And I was with him 2 nights before Reagan was elected. I was working with the NAACP and doing voter registration. And I was upset that Reagan was elected president. And John shored me up and he told me justice and peace will always prevail. And he was one of the bravest, most insightful people I ever met. Show you how brave he was. Not only did he do that march on Edmund Pettus Bridge, but we were dining in Tatiana on Calle Ocho in a restaurant in Miami. And 2 people stood up and pulled out guns. And naturally, being Eve, the good boy from Camden, New Jersey, I took flight. And I was outside at a restaurant about a block away, and I realized John was not with me, and I had to go back in the restaurant and get him. He just stayed there and kept his cool. God bless him, and what a tremendous influence he was on all of us. Let us turn within and receive a word from the Christian text, the Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. Now, we have some students that were with us from last year. We have professional homiletics people like Reverend Sharon Callender here. And I guess she's probably wondering and scratching her head, what the devil does John 3:16 have to do with the beloved community? So let's proceed with our lesson today. And I'm going to unpack that a bit for us. It's a pleasure, definitely, for me to bring you this message, because the theme, the beloved community, requires of us as a faith community to examine who we are and where we stand in the world. So much has been written by academia about what the beloved community is or is not, and who coined it first. Doesn't matter. I submit more attention should be focused on realizing it and understanding Dr. King's vision of it. In a strong prophetic voice, Dr. King said, we must build a community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate. He dreamed of a community where each person can achieve their fullness, living out their lives, using their gifts in security and safety. Dr. King went on to say, our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. Qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. simply put by Walter Fluker, a Thurman expert and mentee. He said that the beloved community is just a simple concept. It's a community ordered by love. I've grown to know that it's the intended community of God. The beloved community is a vision conceived in the divine mind and heart and revealed to great prophetic voices like Josiah Royce, who combed it, Howard Thurman, who deeply pondered and reflected on it, and King, who brought the vision to our forethoughts. The term beloved community has a soft, fuzzy, warm, sentimental feel to it. When you say it, you can kind of hear that wonderful world song that Louis Armstrong sang, trees of green, red roses too. You can feel a bit abstract, but it's a direct opposite of the hardcore reality of the divided, layered 21st century world we stand in every day that is wrought with enemy thinking, racism, sexism, militarism. Each of us lives in the grips of a world, for the most part, that lies outside the beloved community. It's a choice many of us make not to feel or witness the pain and suffering of the other. Our 21st century hurried, fast-paced, digitized world has made us highly insular, more internal, and too busy in only seeing our own needs and our own little patch of the globe. The way the beloved community feels and the image it summons are in stark contrast to the cold questions it forces us to ask of ourselves and the cold reality of the monumental change required of us to do our part in realizing it. In his strong prophetic voice, Dr. Howard Thurman said, "The beloved community is a deep, bold vision that will ask of us three fundamental questions. The first is, what do you believe of God? What you believe of God is central to your thinking of your role in realizing a beloved community. Do you see God as a deliverer of and on the side of the oppressed? Do you think God sits idly by and does not hear or see the pain and suffering in the world? The answer to all of the above is yes, God is and does all the above. The question is how? I will tell you how. First, God sends us the prophetic voices like King, Royce, Thurman. God sent us Rabbi Gelberman, Swami Satchidananda of the New Seminary. Most of all, I want you to get this, our brothers and sisters. Most of all, God sent you, the members of this faith community, and has urged a partnership with each of you to build the beloved community. Embrace and act on this urging. We have to question our own faith community. The one we're in right now, the New Seminary and the Interfaith Temple. We have to question where we stand in the struggle for justice, equality, and our commitment to building the beloved community. When I enrolled in the New Seminary, I didn't see that in a lot of our students. What I saw was the interfaith movement at that time was kind of an upscale movement, an exclusive movement. And I think it's evolved. Communities can start with one vision and one purpose and evolve and change, particularly faith communities, if they listen and unmute the voice of God within. The work required of us is not in some far off place. And for those of you that are training to be ministers or are ministers, the work, again, I'll say the work required of us is not in some far off place. It's right where you stand today. And you can and must do this work. I'll tell you, God uses ordinary people. You look through any of the great faith traditions and the people that were called to divine service by the God of those people were pretty much ordinary. Also know this, God sends those with a revolutionary and mystic heart to redirect our focus to question and challenge the institutions and how they are used to mute the voice of God in our hearts and blunt our ability for us to feel the divine presence within. We must unmute the voice of God within and blunt the ability for us to see the divine presence and feel the divine presence within. We must remove the obstacle that blunts that. Now, we're fully aware that not all faith communities endorse the vision of a beloved community. We see this at play every day with the evangelical right who fights to maintain this divided and layered society. They use religion to divide community and not to build it. They use religion to divide community and not to build it. But what they sow and promote is not from the mind and heart of God. Let us not forget that the most segregated hour in America is at 9 p.m. Sunday morning. This morning, for the most part, Black folks go to their churches. White folks go to theirs. Other groups go to theirs. Let us not also forget the major theme of King's Birmingham jail letter, which was to call the sideline, unwilling white faith community to join the struggle for justice and equality, which they did not see as part of their mission or message from God. Think about that for a minute. Let's not also forget the late, great former General Secretary of the UN who said, "It's never the faith, it's how the faithful behave towards each other." You must believe as members of this faith community that God has sent you as a main ingredient in the divine plan to build the beloved community. So the answer to the question I posed at the very beginning of this lesson about the text from John 13:6, which reads, again, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, one and only son," and its relevance to building the beloved community. What is its relevance to that? It simply means, as Professor Joseph Conti of Wesley Theological Seminary said to me, God incarnated, sent part of himself in the form of Jesus into the world, Reverend Alan Siegel, so he could have a conversation with us. The conversation was to talk to us about building the kingdom of God or the beloved community on earth. The same applies to all the great prophets from any of the faith traditions. I ask you this morning to be part of this conversation, be part of the dialogue, to shift from the divided, labored world of enemy thinking to the beloved community. On to Dr. Thurman's second question, where do you stand today and where do you belong? Where you stand is where you belong. I'm always amazed and amused about the countless stories I hear from well-intended fellow clergy members who do missionary work. They are so proud of their service, and rightfully so. I'm not diminishing it at all. It's good work. It's God's work. But they did not have to go to Haiti, Africa, Asia, or Latin America. All they needed to do was what some could do right here in Washington, is point their car eastward on Pennsylvania Avenue, Tatiana and Amber, and cross the 11th Street Bridge to Southeast Washington, or go to parts of nearby Maryland, or an hour away to West Virginia, where poor whites in Appalachia are suffering. Here in DC, you can walk about a half mile from the Capitol and find stark poverty. This brings me to the third question of Dr. Thurman. What do you notice? What do you notice where you stand? Thurman actually offers an answer to this third question. He says, I'd like you to consider a willingness to see that any moment where you are in time and place with other living human beings is forged by God for you to be there and is the foreground for the beloved community. This is where you move from the concept of the beloved community to the reality of it. Thus, any time and place when you are interacting with other human beings is the fertile ground to begin sowing the seeds of the beloved community. So again, yes, this beloved community can feel abstract. We need to get to a place where it becomes more concrete by acknowledging the deep love God has for us and expand this love to the whole of creation Notice I said the whole of creation. We must see the face of God on every person and feel the presence of God within them. We must see the face of God on every person and feel the presence of God within them. A quote from an article Thurman offered concerning the beloved community. The missing link in our age is empathy and the recognition of shared humanity of another who may on the surface appear different from us. Empathy is a muscle that goes flaccid with disuse. The lack of empathy is a source of division, injustice, and unnecessary suffering. The times in which we live call not just for empathy, but for a radical form of empathy, my brothers and sisters. So, to bring this together, the beloved community is not in an office. It's not in a castle. It's not in a government administrative building. It's not housed in any organization. It cannot be found in a centralized location other than in the collective consciousness and hearts of all. The beloved community can be found deep inside of you where God abides. And when you find the God within you, only then can you see God in the whole of creation and in the minds and hearts of all. It is in bringing the God within out to the world that builds and sustains the beloved community. I will close with a poem of mine called, Who Am I? Who am I? I am a walking manifestation of the divine mind and heart interconnected to the whole of creation. Who am I? I am that man. Who am I? I am that woman. Who am I? I am that girl. Who am I? I am that boy. Who am I? I am my community. I am that Buddhist. I am that Christian. I am that Hindu. I am that Jew. I am that Muslim. I am that Yoruba. I am that Vodun. I am the goddess. I am the ancient healer, griot, elder from Africa. I am the medicine man, woman, and shaman of the plains and mountains of the America. I am all those suffering from illness and pain. I am all those who are oppressed, dispossessed, marginalized, and live in fear. I am the sand, the sea, the wind, the forest, the moon, and the stars. I am a brother and sister to all the creatures of the forest, plains, air, and sea, and I am in communion with all through the divine mind and heart. I am the beloved community. God bless you. Thank you for your time.